I was super blessed. Like on my first day, Kev, right? This is crazy. He didn't have to do this. My boss at the time didn't have to do this. He knocked on the studio door and introduced me to Ringo and his producer at the time. I don't know who it would have been. I said, "Oh, this is Will, the new member of staff," and Ringo was like, "Oh well, welcome aboard the mad ship," or whatever it was, and I was like, "Okay, cheers."
Tom Petty. Tom Petty Project. Tom Petty. Hey, Tom Petty Project.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Hey, thanks for tuning in again to the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown, and I've already recorded one episode of the Ultimate Catalogue Clash tonight. I'm a couple of beers, so I'm a little bit slurry, a little bit loose. Don't worry about it. Today's guest Ember episode is the fantastic chat that I had with someone who started out as a listener and has become a long distance friend, and someone who I really enjoy talking to, and actually I really have to talk to more often. Will Porteous is a man of very many talents who has on his own podcast interviewed a ton of top shelf A-list stars of stage, both theatrical and musical and screen. As a musician, he's played a ton of Tom's songs, and as a gardener, as you'll discover, has rubbed shoulders with the musical elite. This is a longer episode than normal because Will and I got into some, well, I think they're really interesting areas about podcasting and artistic endeavor in general that I think you'll enjoy listening to. So don't forget to tune in again tomorrow for Will's answers to my 10 questions. For now, though, sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Will Porteous.
Yeah.
What about you're in Dis now in Norfolk, which was hilarious when I found out that that's where you were moving to or moving back to, because I got one of my best friends in the military who's from this tiny little town in rural England. Is that where you're from originally, or where were you brought up?
Mate, I couldn't be any further from Dis, but I think like mentally I feel like I'm very, very far from Dis. So I grew up in Surrey. In a little village called Chiddingfold, which is near a bigger town called Guildford. Woohoo! And it's a very exciting story, very exciting. But we moved here during the epidemic in like the middle of one of the lockdowns. I can't remember which. I can't remember how. It's all just a big weird blur. Like I feel like I've blinked, fallen asleep, and woken up in a field somewhere. So and we've got a larger house because a flat in London is worth like 18 million quid, and a normal house in the country is worth like a normal price. So, that's the roundabout way of saying that I don't know what the hell has happened in the last 2.5-3 years.
But where did you grow up then? What was, because I know you've got connections with, and I'm going to say Southampton or Portsmouth, and I can't remember which one it is now.
The Saints, mate. Don't ever get confused with that. So I was born in Fareham, which is Hampshire, down in the south coast, the kind of near the South Downs, beautiful, beautiful countryside. Yeah. And then moved like around Hampshire. I just moved to a little town called Farnham, which is beautiful. And then about 5 or 6, then moved to this village called Chiddingfold, and it was just beautiful, very, very, very quintessential, mate. Like ridiculous. Yeah. I think the house prices back then were normal. Normal people could buy things and do things with their lives. Now it's insane. But back then it was just cool, normal. I had a working men's club in the village, right? I can't even believe that. A working men's club in a Surrey village. And I saw some incredible bands there, mate. Just absolutely phenomenal. Like Eric Clapton would be down there often, and Damon Hill, believe it or not, random people.
Really?
And Damon Hill used to play his, I think it was like a Gibson 335, a red one, and I have a really, really weird, vivid memory of it. And Mike and Mechanics used to practice down there, and it was quite extraordinary. And I just used to go see loads of blues bands. You would have loved it. You would have absolutely loved it.
So are your parents musical? Like, what was music like in the house growing up?
Yeah. My mum was kind of like really weirdly got me into Status Quo and the great man Tom Petty, and the Heartbreakers. And my dad was vaguely musical. He's a little bit like you were saying earlier, a restless creative, a little bit like me. Like he wasn't like a writer or anything like myself, but he would, constantly be challenging himself either to cycle way more than he should, or pick up the saxophone or the flute or what have you. And here's the most quintessential thing you could ever dream of, really, is I was in a church band from about the age of 14 behind the drums, rocking it. with my dad on the saxophone, sometimes on the flute. Oh yeah. And it was like my dad, and then my mate Paul, who was like 10 years older than me, on the bass. And then that slowly evolved into like meeting real normal people and bands and music. So I got a very, very sheltered, sweet upbringing in music. And I'm like, I don't know if you want me to talk about a first gig or anything, just to give a rough idea.
Yeah, sure.
But my first ever gig was the Kinks at Portsmouth Guildhall in '96.
Oh my God! Wow.
But then I say that's probably a load of bullshit, because it was definitely the Kinks is one of my first memories of a gig, right?
Yeah.
And then, but my all-time first memory was like that really just kicked everything into gear, was seeing Status Quo at Wembley Arena.
Yeah.
And everybody just going mad to Rocking All Over the World. Like it was something else. It was genuinely like a calling, like it went off inside me. And I think there are loads of people, obviously, that would have that experience. Do you have one?
It's funny though, what you say about Quo, because they're one of those bands now, I think, that is just completely forgotten. But they were one of the biggest bands in the UK for a long time.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest live acts as well. And they put on a great show, and it was rock and roll, right?
Right.
I mean, I didn't go to gigs growing up, really. I remember seeing my dad play lots, and would go watch him practice. So that was my first exposure to live music.
What did your dad play?
My dad played guitar in a couple of different pretty good draw pub bands, but just cover bands, But listening to him play like All Right Now and Take It Easy and all these songs, and sitting on a bunch of fruit boxes in Uncle Dennis's back room and in the grocers. Same thing, right? It's a very pastoral sort of working class upbringing, but. I was going to say to you too, Will, you said something there that I always find interesting, that your dad was sort of that restless creative type. And I do find that, because my dad was a musician, my mum always encouraged that. And being around people who are like that, it definitely I think it gives you license to do it yourself. Right. You sort of think, I can do that. Then I can just write a book if I want to, and I don't need to ask anyone's position, or I don't need to worry about this or that, or I can be in a band, and I always like that. And people who grow up with musicians around the house or musical instruments around the house, you're just more likely to drift into it, I think.
I think so. Yeah. I can't remember what the phrase is or the saying is, that you get like a license to do something. It's if you're creative, whatever it might be, that you read something from an article, and it gives you the license to then go, oh, it's okay to do that. And although I saw my dad like playing sax and flute or whatever, and then I got drawn into like village events, so like trying to scrape a band together to play the local fun day or the local tombola day or whatever it is. And finding myself like playing exactly like All Right Now. Do you know what I mean? Like Nights in White Satin, that kind of stuff. And I suppose in a way, there was a bit of a license there. I was able to play the drums, and it wasn't like a big deal. You should be doing your maths, you should be doing your English, get ready for your exams. Because I've always struggled with dyslexia massively my entire life. So academia I've just passed me by completely. But I suppose you're right. Having someone in the house who's vaguely musical does give you a bit of a license. It's quite cool. And my God, it's special, because sadly, my dad died when I was 22. So I don't really have an awful lot of I have core memories of him, but I don't, they're not, it's not like they're ebbing away, and they'll never lose some of their potency. But being able to like sometimes close my eyes and think about those moments in church, like I'm not religious at all.
Yeah.
But to think about that church environment and to think about him playing is really essential. And that does actually chime in with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, because that music was just so important in our family to such a degree. And I suppose why we're sat here talking now, because it's like music just sews you together as a family, and if you're lucky enough to have that,
Yeah. there's a funny thing there too with, I think, with English people, especially because you can like church and not be religious because there's something about the atmosphere of those old buildings with a pipe organ and a good organist and a choir. It's beautiful. I don't care what anyone says. I love Amazing Grace as much as I love Mary Jane's Last Dance, right? Music is
Says the
music.
man that loves prog rock, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. There's something about an organ, Will. It's not. Come on, mate. Just be honest. Yeah. You just want a fat organ sound.
Hey,
in
you're
a
the one
church.
You're the one bringing up flutes. I mean, I'm not bringing up Jethro Tully.
Fair play, mate. Fair play. You got me there. Cheeky
So,
bugger.
what was the first then? What's your first memories of Petty's music then? Like you said, obviously, if your mum was listening to it, it was in the house. Do you remember sort of a pivotal moment of thinking, hey, who's this guy? I like that specifically.
Yeah, very much. I mean, because I know you were like, you got into Petty's music a little later, a little further down the line.
Yeah.
For me, I was roughly 10 years old. So it's my mum goes into this is a throwback. My mum goes into W.H. Smith's, right? So those are people that don't know what W.H. Smith's is I don't know what it's a posh stationery place,
Like a
basically.
newsagents kind of
right
stationery type, yeah.
But enormous. And they used to do music. They used to sell, I think they used to sell actual vinyl records as well. But my mum bought the cassette of Into the Great Wide Open. And look, I can't remember when or where, but I was in the car. It was in the car somewhere. And I heard those guitars for the first time. And that was it. That was just, what is this? What is this?
Yeah.
Like, and I can remember that with a few songs. I can remember that with Jimi Hendrix live at the Isle of Wight Festival, Johnny Be Good, or whether it was Berkeley University, I can't remember which. And then it was Nebworth when Page or Plant did Rock and Roll, and being just like, what is this? And then my dad playing me in the car and being like, that's it, that's the song, that's Dad, that's the song. And like, but it being just such a huge part of me, and listening to that album. I was listening to Into the Great Wide Open today, because to not refresh my memory, because I've listened to it more than any album ever, any other. It's the most listened to album. But then I was listening to the Isle of Skye the day with my daughter. We were going around the Isle of Skye in Scotland for about a week, just her and I. And I put it on with all this stupidly, ridiculously beautiful background, right? The scenery that's melt your eyes and explode your heart in the best possible way. And yeah, it's extraordinary, man. And I think it was my mum in a car. She heard it immediately and had to buy it. She was just like, I don't know what this is. This has to be owned. And God, I can't even. I'm telling you right now, if she hadn't got that, there's every chance I would never have listened to Tom Petty. There's every chance, because my uncle who loved him, I very, very, very rarely saw my uncle when I was growing up. Tom Petty was never big in the UK ever. Forget it. So
and It's the Great Wide Open was his biggest album. I mean, that's the only one that topped the chart, right? But that was by far his biggest album in UK. Yeah, it was the biggest seller. And Learning to Fly and Into the Great Wide Open, the two biggest. I mean, Full Moon Fever, you would think, because it nominally was a bigger album in terms of sort of sales, but going through and listening to Into the Great Wide Open, it's this. I always think it's the same thing. Maybe we'll just start talking a little bit about the album. Then I always think the same thing with Long After Dark is the end of that Iovine trilogy, and that's when they perfected that sound. That's when they can write songs like that just perfectly in their sleep. Into the Great Wide Open's almost that same thing, where he's gone through Full Moon Fever and the Wilburys, and he's just locked into that vibe now. Him and Jeff Lynne are just knocking him out left, right, and center. There's not a filler track on that album, on Into the Great Wide Open. Every song's just like, holy shit, this is amazing.
Yeah, totally, mate. I think for me, it's like, for some very weird reason, I think it's got, for me personally, underlined personally, right? It's got more legs than Full Moon Fever for me, because I've just heard the other songs so much on the radio. I don't turn the radio off, because it's still, man, you can't turn Petty off.
Yeah.
But it's just too much. So Into the Great Wide Open is a deeply personal album, but just before we go on to the album, it's to get really nostalgic, mate, because I think so much of Petty's music is tied up with nostalgia with an awful lot of people, is that this album went on every holiday we ever went on, every summer. As soon as the sun came out, the barbecue came out, William, go and put on Tom Petty. Go and put on Tom Petty. It just learning to fly guitars. As soon as that wall of Lynn guitars kicks in, that's the summer. That's when it starts. And there's no getting around it. My sisters, they feel the same, and it's a very nostalgic thing. I wonder if anybody else has that. UK, US, whatever, like ever has that connection with his music. Like you put on a specific Petty song and it kicks. You almost 100%. Save it for the summer. Yeah.
100%.
Sorry, I'm waffling now. Sorry.
I've talked to guests though about exactly that, right? Because there's albums from every artist that are just so deeply sort of ingrained in your DNA. Like Beatles for Sale for me. I think Revolver's my favorite Beatles album now because I think it's their best album. You can make an argument with Sgt. Pepper, everything else. But Beatles for Sale was the one that I sat in front of my dad's record player with headphones on 4 hours listening to over and over and over again. So of course those ones that you're always going to go back to. But when it's a family, like if the whole family loves it, then those are fewer and far between, I think, right? So that makes it even just that tad more special for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there are a lot of bands like that, and what I call, like, it's really weird to describe. It's really, really hard to, I cannot articulate it enough. Or, sorry, I can't try and describe it enough because there are Saturday morning bands, right? My dad would go to the record player on a Saturday morning when always the bullshit stress of his life and job, his self-employed work was just absolutely grinding him down, and you'd hear him put on, like, I don't know, Graceland or whatever.
Yeah.
And it would send a vibe through the house. It's Saturday, Dad's doing okay, let's chill. And for me, Petty's music is Saturday morning music, and it's hard to describe what that is. I think to articulate it, I would need to write a freaking essay on it, mate.
Hey, you're a good writer. I think that's something you should explore because that is an interesting, I think, Saturday weekend mornings, and same thing with me growing up, because we weren't oversaturated with media. I didn't really have activities to do because I grew up in a working class family. You just kind of hung around and did whatever. But Saturday mornings, there was something about those. And I was the same thing. It was music in our house. So it was Beatles for Sale. It was the Kings. It was T-Rex. It was Deep Purple and Zeppelin and The Who and all these great bands that have stuck with me ever since then, because apart from the music just being bloody brilliant, there's just that connection that will never go away, right?
Oh, totally, mate. I mean, like, just you referencing The Who there, for me, it was just Who's Next. It was Baba O'Reilly, just hearing that for the first time and just, Won't Get Fooled Again or whatever. Just wow, like, this is just, it's for me, it's drug music. It's just, it really is, It's
that first hit of rock and roll, right? It's because I've said it on the podcast before. Totally. The first time I heard Black Dog, I was like, oh, this is my music. Yeah, and I like Mum's Rod Stewart and I love classical music, but this is for me. This has just made everything tighten up, and now I'm just happy, right? So,
and that's why you're a drummer. That's exactly why you're a drummer, right? Because you heard Black Dog and it went in. That was like your like entry music, right? Your entry track.
That was a slow burn though. I didn't pick up my drums till I was 40. So I was a pianist, I played.
Oh my god! I thought you've always been a drummer. That's mental. No, I think that's me projecting. I thought we were, because I picked up the drums when I was 14. So no, fuck that. I was like 12 or something. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And my mum and dad bought me a drum kit, and I went into and they surprised me with it, and I fell on the floor and fainted for real. It was mad.
Oh,
yeah, mental.
Just overwhelmed.
Yeah, totally. It was crazy. Yeah. Absolutely incredible.
So when you start playing, then, you said like your first bands. Let's just jump back a little bit to that though, because who are you trying to sound like someone, or is it literally just we'll play anything? Did you have heroes as a drummer? What was your sort of entry into actually playing live?
Well, I'm not a very technical drummer. I've always been a Ringo Starr drummer. I've always just been backbeat is my go-to, and I've played like loads and it's always just been like, stop showing off and just keep to the groove, for God's sake, man. So when I was growing up, I was always immediately limited. So like I would drum along to like Lemon Song, or Heartbreaker, and just keep the groove as best I could. But then I'd love drumming along to Status Quo, because that was just like really, really easy. Just four
on the floor
or like trying to learn the blues shuffle, which was pretty tricky. But I mean, mate, I had like this crappy Argos catalog Ghetto Blaster, and like that would just be on full blast, and I'll be pounding the drums. My neighbor, who was a veteran from the Desert Rats in the Second World War, used to love it. He had a butcher's shop and he used to go, "Oh, them drums, I love them drums. Reminds me of the drummers in the war. I love it. I love marching music." His name was Mr. Paul, and he was a rotter. He was an absolute rotter, but he was brilliant.
Yeah.
And yeah, my mum and dad, Christ, what it's like. You hear a drum kit in a house now, and you're separated from it all. You think, bloody hell, that is a racket.
It's loud.
Yeah,
it's really loud.
I don't know how they put up with it, genuinely, but they did, and I think I think they realised how important it was to be, because I was obsessed. I was utterly obsessed with music.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to be, because like when I went to boarding school, I took a guitar with me, this piece of crappy electric thing with me, and I tried my best and what have you. Never really got didn't get any good, but it wasn't until after school that I really, really picked up the guitar and what have you. Wanted to progress that, but the drums were the bedrock for me. And I tell you, man, anybody who's got an idea of, should I do guitar or drums, and they love them equally, just do the drums, because everyone needs a drum. The drummers are in short supply, man.
You can always get a gig. As a bass player or a drummer, you're always going to have a gig. Yeah.
Yeah. Just do it. For God's sake. We need drummers. The world needs them.
It's also great stress relief too, though, right? I mean, there's the technical and the precision of playing, and it's nice to try and learn that. But sometimes, if you need to let off a bit of steam, just turn everything up, crank it up, and just pound on them. There's
but really quickly, what age 40, what got you into the drums? What was it? Just fuck it, I've got to do this.
Well, I always tap. My wife goes, "Can you please stop tapping?" So if anything's on, I've always drummed along to it. But of course, as a working class kid, not to, we were poor when I was growing up. We had barely a 2 pence,
Right, yeah.
Just didn't have any money to buy drums. And my uncle was a drummer, so I kind of tapped around, I think, a little bit on his. But honestly, it was the video game Rock Band. Friends of ours got Rock Band, and I went over and I said, I can coordinate my arms and legs. I understand where the parts are. I can play. So kept playing a little bit, and then recorded my first song with my friend Randy, and went and literally called and said, he said, "Do you want to try some drums?" I'm like, I mean, I can give it a go. So the first drum part I ever played is recorded on one of the first songs I got. So after that, I thought, you know what, I think I might try this. So for my 40th birthday, I got a drum kit.
Mate, I love that. That's so cool. You probably got a reasonably good one, age 40. I'm thinking, not like the piece of shit I had growing up.
It's my little DTX, yes, Yamaha DTX, 502 or something. It's a decent little
machine. The electric behind you,
yeah,
nice, love it, man. Like the electric kits now are insane. They're off. I remember having an electric drum kit in the oh my goodness, the early noughties, late 90s, and it was wow. Used to turn up to gigs with it, and there's the tech, the sound guy would look at you going, it's not Halloween, mate. Where's your drum kit? Right,
what do you want me to do with this?
It's a drum kit, mate. We're a new band, man. This is the new sound, man.
Phil Collins used to talk about playing the early Simmons drums, right? And he said it's like playing Formica, but it's like because there's no give, so it kills your wrist. You can't there's no nuance, so just bashing around on them. But it's great fun. It's great fun to play them. So interestingly, though, I think that you were talking about, because what you're describing there for people who, and I've used this term on the podcast before, you're a pocket drummer. Then you just sit in the groove, play the beat, and I'm the same. I'm not a super technical drummer at all, right? But that's where Petty and the Heartbreakers have Stan Lynch, who I wouldn't describe as a pocket drummer. He's a flair drummer, and he throws all sorts in. Where then they get Steve Ferroni in.
Definitely.
Now Steve has got way more chops than almost any drummer on the planet, but he's more than happy to just sit in the pocket and be that heartbeat and that backbeat.
Because that's what I love, right, man? When they talk about Steve Ferroni's audition, and he's just what track is that he auditioned and just nailed it?
You Don't Know How It Feels. Yeah.
I feel like I'm doing a Bruce Hornsby song there. But that's the kind of, that gives you license. Drummers like that give you license to go, hey, people want the backbeat, not necessarily the punter, but some people you're in a band, you walk in, be yourself. I mean, Jesus wept, what you're gonna do. Because I remember that in the Running Down the Dream doc, it was like they were saying how, they auditioned a bunch of drummers, and I think this was in between like when they were doing the Damn Torpedoes album or something, and they're having problems with Stan and or trying to get a different sound. I don't know what the hell it was, but they were, we auditioned a lot of drummers, but none of them were Stan,
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I get that. Like, and people do drummers down so much, but man, you get a band and you get a okay drummer versus the drummer, and
Yeah.
it transforms everything,
And a
And
bad
I
drummer
just,
can kill a band completely stone
God,
dead, right? Or if even not the right
totally,
drummer for that band. Yeah.
yeah. And like I think that's why I just wanted to just
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
groove it, man, because it's simple and people dig it.
I love that story.
Backbeat, the word is on the street.
That story you're saying though, but like with when Ferroni comes in and Kenny Aronoff is loading out, and they haven't
Oh,
told him who the
really?
auditions for, and he's like, Kenny Aronoff didn't book this. Who the hell is in there? But it just because great players again. But and I also think that I've talked about this lots, and you think about Ferroni or I can never Phil Rudd from AC/DC.
Oh, brilliant.
Sounds really
Brilliant.
simple, but they've got a very specific timing and a very specific groove. So you
Yeah.
don't know how it feels. Sounds like anyone should be able to play it, but you've really got to pay attention to play it properly.
Yeah.
And it's at
But
one of those weird tempos for a drummer too, right? Where it's in an uncomfortable tempo because you want to go faster on that song, but no, you got to slow it down. It's got to be played that fast.
totally. However, this is the thing. When I spoke to Steve Ferroni for my little podcast, right? And I didn't know how to articulate this. And I didn't know how to say to him, I love your simplicity,
Yeah.
without sounding like being rude, because I don't know him. Like, he doesn't know me. We probably only grew up like 50 miles from each other, whatever. But like I was, obviously a few years apart, but I just got I think I did okay. But essentially I just want to say to him, I just love your simplicity. And it just, you can really, it allows the foundation for other instruments to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
And I think, that's what I adore. That's probably what I love about Into the Great Wide Open, actually, because it is, it's not very flary at all, but when there is, a bit of flair, Jesus, it pops out.
Yeah. Well, I was listening to, so the last episode was that King's Highway.
Right.
And I've never really picked up on and noticed that in the second two verses, because I always think it's like two verses to start, two verses chorus, two verses chorus. But Stan starts playing in the back half of that phrase. He's playing like this big fill on the toms. So he does a double snare hit, and then he plays this big fill, but you don't notice it because it's mixed a bit lower, and he's not syncopating it, and he's not overplaying it, he's not over-egging it, and it's just perfect. But it's playing. Just that ability to play for the song is so important, and I think Tom was always lucky with his drummers, right? He just knew exactly who needed to be on what records.
I'm gonna pick you up and take you far away. Yeah, now you've got me thinking.
Yeah,
I'll have to think about, because oh man, I think that is perhaps like not maybe overlooked as a percussive album, because I think like there's a lot of percussion in that album that really lifts it and lifts certain tracks. There's the you were talking about the track the other day, whether it was Learning to Fly or I can't remember what song now it was, perhaps the second track, but whatever it was. There's a wooden block that's being hit, right? And I dig that. I love a wooden block with a bit of reverb.
Yeah, that's what Learning to Fly out that. Yeah, cha 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 cha, and it comes in off on the different beat and finishes on a different bar. Again, just those little things that they add in, and I mean this one definitely, because Full Moon Fever was Phil Jones was playing drums. And it's very, very straight, that one. There's barely anything in that, apart from when Keltner plays on I can't remember which song it is now. But with this one again, when Stan comes back in, well, now it sounds like Full Moon Fever aesthetically, because Jeff Lynne's still producing it, and he's mixing his toms a certain way, and the snare sounds a certain way. But the playing itself, it only sounds like Stan Lynch, because like I said, Steve Ferroni wouldn't play it that way. So.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Man. And I mean, you've got so many, like, making some noise is just like this prime example, isn't it? Down, 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 down. And when the drum, it's just solid, man. Like, if you were a kid growing up, it's probably one of the one of the best rock tracks that you could get, because it's going to get you into country rock as well. It's going to, it's going to feed your appetite and hopefully your desire to find what else is out there. And I think that's what I loved about it. And also, like, seeing my dad rock out to it, right? That's an important thing. I think Mark Maron spoke about this with his, Mark Maron, the podcaster. But he was like talking about how his dad was a pretty messed up guy, but he would see his dad, when he was driving, rocking out to like Buddy Holly or whatever. And and it was like, oh my God, my dad's doing okay. This is great. What's this music? It's gonna be okay. I think not that my dad was a psychopath or anything, but just to see him rocking out, it's like when we first listened to Gary Moore. I mean, Gary Moore did this amazing live blues album, Blues Alive, I think, and there's Walking by Myself, which is basically metal blues. And my dad, man, he came into the living room like with the biggest smile. He was like beaming with excitement. You've got to listen to this track, Will. You've got to listen to this track. And I was blown away when I heard it, man. I didn't know that the blues could sound like that, because I was a bit of, I was like blues.
Well, it's when they brought the rhythm into the blues, right? So when you get real rhythm and blues, and that's where rock and roll comes from. And it's what a lot of modern rock bands forget, is you got to put the roll back in there. And Making Some Noise is such a great example of that, because that swings so hard. It's so good, I know it's funny, and I'm going to ask you a question later in my 10 questions, and I'm going to throw back to that song, because I thought of, basically, it's if you could pick any artist to pick any Tom Petty song, and I thought of an artist who would cover this, Making Some Noise, and crush it. I think they do a brilliant job with it, because it's a blues rock song. So yeah. Excellent. Well, before we get into the Great Wide Open in a bit of depth,
I've got a couple.
I wanted to talk about you mentioned that you had your own podcast. And you sort of threw that away as a little comment. And people should know that Will interviewed, some A-list. Let's not sugarcoat it. Some A-list human beings. Like when I saw Michael Palin on your podcast, I was like, that is there another Michael Palin who's like an accountant or a politician? No, that's the Michael Palin. So tell us about the Langauge podcast, how that came about, and the journey with it, because I know it's sort of on either a hiatus or a wrap.
No, the definite hiatus, but I got it going. So it used to be a political thing, a political vehicle, if you will, and I was a big Liberal Democrat fan. Okay, I went to church, and I just it was a natural progression for me with the Paddy Ashdown and the Liberal Democrats. And I think that's my dad. Just. He Radio 4 was on in the background, and then question time, and then obviously Brexit happened and completely just messed our country up, and is still messing our country up. And I was like, I want to do something about this. So I started this podcast. I wanted to ask people within the Liberal Democrats what was going on, and if there was any hope to be had. And then I got pretty bored pretty quickly of just the Lib Dems, and I sort of cast my net really wide, and I started interviewing people like Michael Heseltine and Ken Clarke. So Michael Heseltine was a former Deputy Prime Minister of the UK, and Ken Clarke was a Chancellor of the Exchequer. Really, 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 really big hitters in their time. And then Nick Clegg, leader of the Lib Dems. Just so many political figures. And I managed to get like front page of the Guardian for like 3 days over Christmas period, because my next door neighbour was a political editor of the Guardian, and said, look, I wanted to interview her, but she said, no, you can't interview me, but I'll listen to one of your podcasts and see if there's anything newsworthy. And she just drew up this massive bit that I completely missed in this interview I did with Michael Heseltine, which basically he said he'd prefer a Corbyn government to Brexit, which just freaking blew a lot of Tory minds, which is it's pretty easy to do. Simple, very, very easily offended people. And so and it was great, for about 18 months, 2 years, but I don't know. I just got really disillusioned by politics, and also, I didn't really build up a relationship with the listeners. It was weird. I think they thought that I just went out and got these interviews, and I was somehow affiliated with the BBC or something. I'm a freaking gardener. I was like 1 minute gardening in southeast London, then hightailing up to Westminster to do an interview with X, Y, or Z. One particular interview was mental. For Michael Heseltine, I was on my way to the interview, and I was driving to the tube station, and I got in a road rage situation. A bloke went off he went absolutely mental. I just hooted him because he was parked in the middle of a one-way street, blocking all the traffic. He ended up getting out of his car and hitting my van with his fist. I was like running. I reversed down the street as fast as I could. He got into his car, and there was this like a 5-minute chase around all these roads. I'm freaking out, don't know what to do. I passed the police car, waved the police car down, and they just sorted them out. Basically, they just like blues and twos, chased him off, and then you're like, "You're right, mate. You're right." I was like, "Yeah, I've got to get for an interview." So I'm like literally sweating with terror. Get to the still just about calm down enough to do the interview with Michael Heseltine. Leave the interview, get back to gardening, and then that's the interview that gets me the headlines in the Guardian. But I don't know. It's a mad little anecdote that I think. But then I don't know. I just got bored and then put the podcast down for a year and a half. When I came back, I thought, do you know what? I want to talk to people that like they're in music, like and I hooked some really big fish down the line by like building up slowly, like doing sort of lesser known actors or musicians, and then getting further and further up the ladder, I suppose. But it was like, for people that obviously music lovers listen to this show.
Oh my god!
I did like a deep dive with your mate Paul Zollo, who is probably one of the nicest men in the entire universe.
And it's nice through Facebook. Like, we're Facebook friends. We chat every now and again. Like I said, just such a personable man, and doesn't need to engage with his readers or anybody beyond the fact that he's just a genuinely nice fella. I mean, I do another guy though that you had on that I was looking at again. I think this was, I can't remember what it was Fergal Sharkey.
Totally.
Who's again sort of a guy who's been sort of lost to the annals of time a little bit, but just turned up on Have I Got News for You? Yeah, because he's very active as, very political now. And I mean, he wasn't such Have I Got News for You because he's not combative at all. Like he's not he's very not political. Which you kind of have to be a little bit to be on that show. But it was great seeing him because I remember Fergal Sharkey from, way back in the day. I grew up, as you did, his voice was just on the radio all the time. But so he had all these guests on there. And so, but yet it was very eclectic too, right? Because like you said, you had actors and you had musicians and people from all different sorts of parts of the industry. And what you're saying though, I think that it's the same thing with bands, right? It doesn't matter. Unfortunately, the quality of your show doesn't really matter. Like indie podcasters or like indie musicians, unless you get a break or you get someone backing you, it's so hard to build. No matter, like, you can have the best guests in the world, it's just so hard to build, right? And that's where.
Oh God, yeah. It is really hard. And I think it's important for people to understand that, like, because independent podcasting, it's a love, right? That you do it for the love of it. And sure, if for some reason it takes off, wonderful. Wow, I don't have to be a gardener for the rest of my life. This is going to be great. But it does involve an awful lot of hard work and sacrifice to a degree. But no one's asking me to do it. I'm not like, no one's holding a gun to my head or our heads to do it. But were it not for the fact that people doing this, you wouldn't have, all you would have would be NPR and the BBC or like Murdoch outlets, and you'd be buggered. So, the advent of podcasting saved my life as a gardener. Like, I genuinely mean that, because I've had serious anxiety and depression in my life. And as soon as podcasting came along, I was able to garden with these fantastic people in my head, like, Mark Maron, what have you.
That's good.
And thankfully, when I found your podcast, I'm feeling a lot better now these days. Yeah. But it was a different kettle of fish. But I wish you'd been around like 10 years ago. If you'd been around 10 years
and the
ago,
thing with this podcast too is though that it's very specific.
Podcaster,
what I do on the podcast is extremely specific, and it's if you're not into Tom, people say, "Oh, you got a podcast? It's Tom Petty podcast." Yeah. Oh, I should listen to it. Do you love Tom Petty? I know. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know.
But the thing is with niche, anybody that
Yeah.
wants to start up a podcast should know that the more niche it is, the more chance it actually has of breaking through or finding an audience. Because if you just did like a generic film podcast, all right, good luck, mate. Everyone's got a bloody film podcast. But yeah, people need it because Jesus wept. I grew up in an environment of zero petty. Like there was petty from my family, obviously, but none of my mates knew he was.
Yeah.
He was never on the radio. Forget that. So when he came, whenever he'd come on like the radio on the very very random times, it was like, what the hell? And when you were talking about learning to fly, what integral you're going into it now, hence our chat. It's deeply personal to me because I know you've done all the albums up to now, but this one for me, you talking about it, it's what is really bizarre is it feels deeply personal to me. This is like, okay, Kev's talking about this album, but it's on a different level. Everybody knows about Damn the Torpedoes, Full Moon Fever, whatever,
Yeah.
and what have you. But this, for me, is the secret to my heart, this album. This is like, if you get this album, this is me, so it's like, tread carefully on these songs, mother trucker. No, I'm joking. Do what you like, mate. Do what you like. It's a free world, for God's sake.
But what a privilege to be able to do that too, though, right? I mean, and this connection that I've had, we sort of connected fairly early on, I think, in my sort of little podcast journey, quote unquote.
Very.
I hate the word journey. It's just a bit. It's overused today. It's like my journey. No, so in my trip, let's say that. Then that's more English as a trip. My podcast trip. But
on your trip, lad. On your trip, for fuck's sake.
I've had that with so many people that's the joy of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I said, I've said to other people that I decided to set this on because I thought that by doing it and forcing myself to be disciplined about doing every song and sticking to a weekly schedule, I thought I'll get a lot out of it musically. But the sort of the community that I've found and the people that I've met have enriched my life to such a degree that I just can't imagine not having all these people and people like you in my life. It's just
it's very interesting you say that because I used to say that about my podcast, but I always used to say it to make myself feel better because it wasn't true. So I would interview like Jack Davenport or Palin or whoever the hell. But are they my mates? No, they're fucking not my mates. They've forgotten about the interview after 30 seconds after I've said, see you later, mate.
Yeah.
With this, you're talking to normal people that are like probably gonna affect you, you're gonna reach back into their lives and vice versa. It's really important. And also the people that aren't even on your shows, the normal, like people like me, where I'm not, wanting to chat with you about this album, that means a lot, there's certain validity it adds to their love for Petty and knowing that there's somebody out there that is as geeky, if not slightly geekier, and that's a very, 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 very important thing to have people cherish it because, if you weren't doing it, well, there's no one else that's doing it. And like, it's either that or Bruce Springsteen. I adore Bruce, I'm a massive, massive Springsteen fan, but like, an awful lot of bandwidth is taken up by Bruce, so it's very cool that you're doing this. And I'll stop blowing smoke up your ass soon.
They blow away at us. That's always lovely.
Yeah.
And it's always nice when it's genuine, right? And that's the thing is, and you can
is
tell
blowing
when people
smoke up your ass. Is blowing smoke up your ass an insult, or is it? I can't work out if I just insulted you.
Well, no, it just means you're you're sort of.
Did I, Kevin? Did I just insult you? Did I? Like, let's rewind.
You're English, of course. I mean, I was talking to work colleagues today about when you say something. If someone says to you, "Oh, you should try this food," if an English person, if you give them food and they say, "I don't mind it," yeah, that's not a compliment. We have a very specific way of insulting each other. So
true. Yeah.
Let's talk about the album a little bit then, because like I said, it's important to you. And again, going back and from what I do with the podcast is I'll sit and listen to the album 2-3 times on vinyl, if I have it, which I have everything up to this point at least, just to get that sort of experience of listening to the album as an album. Then I'll go in and start listening to a few songs. Okay, well, what are the highlights in this? And then of course, then is my episode. So now I've got to sit and listen to this song 3 or 4 times, and then sit and listen to it and stop it and rewind it and stop it and rewind it, and then scan forward to see if that's the same here and all that kind of stuff. The rigor of it. But when you listen to this album, just as an album, you put it on. Like I said, I think top to bottom, it's flawless. The songs are great. The performances are great. The production's great. The sequencing is fantastic on this album. When you close side one with All or Nothing,
I
mean, that's your bow out on side one. Is there a song that's going to make you want to pick up the album and turn it over and put on side two more than that song,
Yeah, totally. I absolutely agree. And today, like, when you say, this is such a you thing to say, but when you listen to an album, just when you think you've listened to it enough times, you've got everything out of it, something else will come along and surprise you. Today, I was just thinking how, out of all the Petty albums, this one probably more than any other is so built for it's so built for the countryside. It's so built for the big landscape. It's so built for the open road more than any other album, I think. And I'm I could be wrong, but my feeling is that it's a journey album. It's very much it's a storytelling album more than any other album. He's a great storyteller, Tom Petty, as you know. But like it's just the from the music video of Learning to Fly, the big the fluffy clouds and when they
the
go
airplane hanger and
Utah or something, wasn't it? And from that all the way to like a red wing hawk is circling, the flat top stretches out for days, those kind of things, and then like we're built to last, that the ending track, or Making Some Noise, where he's like he plugged in his guitar and he played a song and he heard it across the canyon. It's an epic sounding album. Right, it's an epic. Lyrically, it's epic. And yet really funny. Two gunslingers. Right.
Oh man, and I was going to say to you, with two gunslingers, there's a thing that always crosses my mind. It's the line, this is the last one of these gunfights you're ever going to drag me to. It's that line. It always reminds me of Life of Brian when he's trudging behind his mum going to the stoning. It's like, oh, for God's sake, another one. So there's just always that comical bit too, but it's also at the same time quite a deep message.
Totally.
Stop fighting. Why are we doing this? Like, what's going on? So like you said, it's got this massive scope to it, and yet there's still small moments on it that are sort of just little sort of vignette things inside this thing that's, Last DJ obviously was sort of a concept album, quote unquote. I think this one's sort of got a bit of a through line too as well, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, it's into the Great Wide Open. It's that sense of scale and it's that sense of forward momentum and forward momentum. So,
and of course, like this is the thing, isn't it? Just to really hark back really quickly to the, that in the song, two gunslingers, when it's like, this is the last one of gunfights you're ever going to drag to, or was it like the crowd hiss and booed?
Yeah, and then everyone hissed and booed.
In the background, I fucking love the kid. I loved that, and it's a grown up. I love that. It's just that's British humor. That's Jeff Lynne going, what if we put, wouldn't we put like that in there? And Tom's sense of humor being from, so on the money. He's from, he's probably, why not? Or whatever, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that one was a co-write, right?
Attention CD listeners, and all that kind of shit. Love that. Brilliant. Epic. There's no like, that's on a cassette. Sorry, that's just on a cassette, right?
It's on the cassette version,
yeah. And you're sitting there in the back of the car, your mum and dad driving, and side one's ended, and then Tom Petty's voice comes on, and take the cassette out or whatever and turn it over. It's like, what? It's brilliant. This is absolute magic. Who else would do that?
It's so relaxed.
And just get away with it. Yeah, I love it.
It's when my daughter and I go play pool at the pool hall, we always take over the jukebox. Like we go put $10 at a time in, and we just
I heard you
talk
about that the other day, and
it's the same thing. Well, whenever we play Running Down a Dream, of course that hidden track always comes on afterwards. But there's that little gap, and so you can see everyone in the pool hall like, look at what's going on here? What is this now? It's just wonderful.
Oh man, I love that story you told the other day. I think you should do that more. I think it's a special thing you have with your daughter, and I hope to have that with my two daughters when I'm older. I think a pool hall around here would probably be a dangerous idea, but even for this, but it's really cute. That's a really lovely picture that you paint in your head for your listeners. I think it's really cool.
Oh, thanks, man. I wanted to talk to you, speaking of daddies and daughters and whatnot, All or Nothing. as
You want
a
it
piece of
all.
lyrical writing, and this is where I was going to ask you after this, but about Tom Petty as a lyricist. But if you
Yeah,
look at the verses in this song, I mean, "You Want It All or Nothing" is brilliant and it's savage and it's visceral.
yeah,
But the verses are so poetic. Your daddy was a sergeant major. You didn't want to, but he made you. Wipe his brass from time to time. It left a picture in your mind. Only Tom Petty writes that. Maybe Dylan.
yeah,
Here I am, a fallen arrow. My load is wide, my street is narrow. My skin
yeah,
is thicker, and I love how he separates
yeah.
that word.
Thinking.
My heart is tougher. I don't mind working on a certain scuffer. And then the coup de grace, sweet chariots of LA swing low. At twilight
Yeah,
time, the smog makes a rainbow. I think that's one of the best lyrics
yeah.
anyone's ever written.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
well, I said this to Paul Zollo when I was doing it for my podcast was fuck you, Petty. Fuck you, Petty. And he had a big chuckle at that because it is just a moment where you go, yeah, all right, mate, chill out. Yeah, look, you can write good lyrics. Just write something average, yeah. All right. Okay, you did Zombie Zoo. Fine. Whatever. But just write something average.
Yeah.
It's unfair. Like exactly. You nailed it, man. Sweet chariots of LA swing low. At twilight time, smut makes a rainbow.
It's
Keep one
so,
eye on the
yeah,
weather.
it's so
Keep one
visual, isn't it?
ear. It is,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Great picture, picture painter. I've got in the toilette behind me, I have Into the Great Wide Open vinyl cover framed.
Yeah.
And that every time I have a wee. But never when I have a number two because I don't want to disrespect
You're
Tom.
facing away at that point.
Exactly. And I'm never going to take it off the wall. Never going to take it off the wall and specifically look at it whilst I'm having a poo because that's deeply disrespectful. It's like it's
Oh my
poor
God.
man. But that album cover,
So good, hey?
it is, man. Like I've toyed with getting that done as a tattoo for many a year, but I don't know. Probably take up my whole chest.
A back tattoo, and it would be difficult because it's framed, right? With it being framed, it's. But yeah, Czech artist Jan Matulka in 1921. It's called Autumn Landscape, and it's owned by the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. So there you go. Yeah.
I'll probably get it because I've got the one of Southern Accents, the returned veteran or whatever.
The veteran in the new field. Yeah.
Yeah, by Old Matey, and I've got that framed. That I think I was inspired to do that by you actually, because I think you either posted a picture of the album or highlighted the artist, and I was like, I want to get that.
Yeah.
So people are and ah about Southern Accents. So I think it's a pretty good album, but yeah, no, it is. Yeah, a lyricist. He's second to none, and that man, all or nothing. Especially, how about that vocal as well? I mean, I know it's going back to production rather than the lyrics, but you want it all. It's like,
yeah.
I've always wanted to ask you whether you know or not what mics were used on this album, specifically for to get that insanely close to the mic feel.
Yeah,
but no overdrive, and like the Learning to Fly particularly as well.
It's a good question because I know that it was recorded part of this was definitely recorded in Mike's garage again.
Yeah.
And then it's a studio in California somewhere, and I can't remember where it is, but it's Jeff Lynne definitely would have sort of wanted specific equipment. So I'll look into that because that's a really good question, Will. I'm not 100% sure. Good question.
I just hope one day this podcast gets big enough or it reaches someone of influence where you can have a chat with Jeff Lynne. Because that's the key to it all, isn't it? Because
wouldn't that be the dream?
Yeah, you'd be running down the dream, dear boy, running it all the way down.
Well, I mean, the ones I always look at are, the dream as a fan is to sit with Jeff Lynne with the tapes and the mixing board and just drop things out and bring things back in and say, well, what was that? How did you record that? Okay, so that was because you just get insights that because he's so good at mixing. Yeah. The parts are distinct, but he's got that way of blending them. So I'm not quite sure. Like we just, again, on King's Highway, when it comes into the verse, there's ooze in there. I'm pretty sure the vocal ooze, but it could be an organ as well. Because the way he's mixed it, you can't quite tell exactly what it is, right? So such a brilliant producer.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I just think it would be like just on an emotional level, what it would be like specifically for me, for this album, to have all the instrumentation taken out, just have TP's like vocal in there, it would I'd probably instantly boo. I'd probably just cry. I'd probably just break down and cry. It's like when you hear, like they reminisce over like Nevermind, and they take out all the vocal and just have Kurt's voice, and it's like, oh, I always struggle with that. That really, really, really messes with my head, and because why is that? But with Tom, it's like, I think that would freak me out, but I'd love to hear it. I'd absolutely love to hear someone pick him apart, and like, but on the other hand, maybe it takes too much of you see too much behind the curtain. I don't know.
I never can. That honestly,
Oh,
and
you need more.
it never spoils it for me either, because like I said, that's one thing that when you do dig in and when you listen with a musician's ear, which is a different thing from just listening casually, as you know. I mean, when you're learning a song, you've got to be able to listen to what's the bass doing. You've got to be able to hear that, and if you can't, then it makes it difficult. It's just made me appreciate it more.
Yeah,
because
totally.
And one thing, one thing that's made me appreciate definitely is how bloody good a technical vocalist Tom Petty was, and he just gets completely overlooked for that in all the conversations about great singers. A brilliant singer, an absolutely brilliant singer.
But I think, do you know what? It's when you say that, I do pick up on that. I do acknowledge that is an actual fact, and you're not just saying that because you've got a fucking Tom Petty podcast. But having said that, I would, if he did start getting too much recognition, I'd be like, yeah, but no, not too much, because he's my secret. He's my little Tom Petty is in my top pocket, and I like that he's my secret. It's like when Weezer brought out their third album, the Hash Pipe and Island in the Sun went through the roof. I was like, no. Weezer are my band. Back off.
Yeah.
And it's pathetic. It is largely pathetic. But I would like to be pathetic on my own,
I know what you mean, though. I know exactly what you mean.
But having said that, would be, whenever the rare occasion in my life where I bumped into Tom Petty fans in the UK, it's like meeting someone who follows Southampton or Man United or whatever. Well, not Man United, because every
that word
follows Man United, especially when I was growing up in the 80s, 90s. But yeah, it's a secret club, and yes, he is underrated. It's true, and perhaps this album a lot, and it's funny, isn't it? Because like Learning to Fly isn't one of those songs where it's really high up there. It's not like F or whatever, or D or whatever. It's a mid range, and he's not pounding out the vocal, and yet it just soars, right?
Yeah. Well, especially that the version from Gainesville on the Running Down a Dream documentary, when he sings it, mainly acoustic. It's just, I mean, like you said, I'm an atheist. I don't believe, I'm a heathen.
Yeah.
But that's spiritual to me. That's just that experience of when music hits you that hard. Yeah. There's something there that's that connection to some other person. That's what I think spirituality really is. It's you connected to something else, something bigger, And so I wanted to ask you then, we've talked a little bit about some, well, of course, yeah, I'm a humanist. I like humans generally. I mean, more or less. not so much some days, but generally. We've got, Learning to Fly is the big single on this. It's not one of the songs I don't think that's massively overplayed from Tom Petty out of his sort of the greatest hits stuff. Into the Great Wide Open, similarly, you're not going to come across that too often on radio, I don't think. I mean, UK, like you said, doesn't play Petty a lot, but it's the deep cuts on this album that are the ones that you always go back to. All the Wrong Reasons. I mean, is a song, again, that sounds like nothing else in the catalogue. And you've got Roger McGuinn on backing vocals. Too Good to Be True almost sounds like, I always think that, man, I could hear Chrissy Hynde singing that. I could hear the Pretenders doing Too Good to Be True. And Out of the Cold, that another riff, this screaming rock riff.
Can you give me all or nothing? Sorry, All the Wrong Reasons. Give me a freaking lyric from that, because that is driving me mental. When you get into a conversation with someone and you're like, oh yeah, I know this album like the back of my hand, and all of a sudden I've forgotten everything about that song.
It's that down in the soul, and it just again, and I think it's because of that refrain. It's just unique in the Petty catalog, and there's a few on this album that are unique in the Petty catalog. It making some noise doesn't really sound like anything else, right?
Yeah, and like, but that I think like I've never really advocated for like swapping in, taking Benmont out of any lineup. Sorry, any Petty album. But it would be quite funny to have Bruce Hornsby on that song, just like doing a piano solo on that. Like I'm not a massive Hornsby fan, but I do like That's the way it is. That album is
It's a great piano line. He's a good piano
Yeah,
player.
it's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Dark of the Sun, you've got on there, which
Oh
I love the contradiction in that title.
God,
Again,
I
he's so good
love
with
that
words,
song.
you know, he's just such a good with his wordplay. You
I
know,
mean, but how good is that intro as well? That really
yeah.
beautifully soft guitar, the guitar picking. You know, not guitar picking, like Bill. I've got a raging cold, so I can't sing it. But like this, it's absolutely beautiful. You know, Mike just playing exactly what the song needs. You
Yeah.
know, and again, it's just the open road, right? It's into the great wide open. It's
Yeah.
everything that you want. It's got that beautiful. I don't know what tempo is on that song. I don't know what you would what you is like 110, 115 or something. It's just like
Mid tempo, yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
it's everything you need. It's just you are cruising and the
Yeah.
sun is going down. You know, what is the dark of the sun? Who bloody cares?
Yeah.
You know,
Doesn't matter.
listen, who bloody cares? Listen to the song. Come back here, yellow, and keep on playing.
You and I will meet again. I wanted to ask you this. I was thinking about this today
Oh
as I was
God.
re-listening. It's sort of in a way to me, it's the most Beatlesy and sort of specifically Harrison-y song that Tom wrote. You can imagine it being a Wilbury song, you know, with Dylan and
Yeah,
George could take a
definitely.
verse in that one. It's got that same. And
Yeah.
I was thinking about this again. Tom wrote way more stuff that sounds like George and Paul than he did stuff that sounded like John.
Yeah,
Lyrically, he wrote lyrics,
definitely.
especially later on, that sounded a bit more like John and were a bit more abrasive. But
Yeah,
melodically, he was a Paul and George guy. Totally right.
totally. Yeah, I don't absolutely agree with that completely. But like that song, you're absolutely spot on with the with that takedown on that because it is it's a beautiful song, and I do. Oh man, like so much of me just like, do you know what? Like if you could just from a live environment. I know we'll probably touch on that later, but you know, musicianship and who you bring in and bring out. But like,
Yeah.
yeah, the way that song is yeah, it's one of those things. It gets to you. But I think that's what these people were. They hung around one another so much that it just caught fire. Like that whole they got the DNA of how to write these perfect songs. They got it
Mm-hmm.
down because they hung out with freaking George Harrison. Just to hang out with George Harrison for long enough, you get like he can deconstruct the DNA of why a Beatles song works. And
Yeah.
Jeff Lynne is clearly all ears, eyes open. He is like, I don't think there's a moment in the studio where Jeff Lynne isn't tapping in to what the geniuses are doing, you know,
Yeah.
and learning from it because he's a genius himself. Jesus Christ, for God's
Yeah.
sake, you know.
But just they were also, and that's the thing that always gets me about the Wilburys. And again, we're going to end up talking about that. But Jeff Lynne, Tom Petty, Mike Campbell, Ben Montench, they were all top tier musicians and songwriters
Yeah,
and performers, but they were also students of music still. They never stopped wanting to learn. They never stopped
yeah,
learning, and they never stopped exposing themselves to things that will make their music and their performances better, which I think that's the thing that separates that level of musicians that last and are durable and have sort of longevity. I think that's the thing that really, really separates
yeah.
those guys.
Yeah, well, I met Ringo Starr a number of times. Basically, I was a groundsman there on his estate down in Cranley in Surrey. I don't know why I did different accents there. Weird. Yeah, I was a groundsman there for a couple of years, and my mate's dad was the head groundskeeper, and he got me a job there. And yeah, and I was super blessed. Like on my first day, Kev, right? This is crazy. He didn't have to do this. My boss at the time didn't have to do this. He knocked on the studio door and introduced me to Ringo and his producer at the time. I don't know who it would have been. I said, "Oh, this is Will, the new member of staff," and you know, Ringo was like, "Oh well, welcome aboard the mad ship," you know, or whatever it was, and I was like, "Okay, cheers, yeah, cheers." And before I went in, he said, "Look, you know, my boss was like, look, if you know, just call him Mr. Starkey, you know."
Yeah.
And I obviously would, if I called him Ringo ever, if I had, I probably would have been fired instantly. Well, I doubt it. But you know, it was just mental,
Yeah.
totally mental. Ned did not have to do that, my boss, and equally, Ringo did not have to go, well, you know, welcome aboard and,
Yeah.
you know, don't let him give you too much shit. And then I was like, oh, he's just, Beatles just sworn. Okay, is that allowed?
Yeah.
Is he allowed to do that? And then, yeah, that was it. And then, there's a load to look. You need an hour. for me to go through this. But yeah, there is a massive anecdote about me playing his drum kit, him having a chat with him about his musical influences and Tom Petty, and then him seeing my tattoo and a massive chat about Johnny Cash. But honestly, it's an hour. It's a fucking hour conversation, though. So
it's great. I always think that there's a level of sort of fame or prestige, or because we get to a certain level in an age in our life where I'm not that impressed by people's achievements anymore. But there are still people that I think if I met in real life, I don't know how I'd handle it. And Ringo's one of them. Paul's one of them. I think Tom probably would have been one of them. And I'm worried that if I ever get to speak to Mike might be one of them. But Ringo, like you said, face to face with Ringo, but he's just a dude. He's just a musician.
Yeah,
people forget that.
But I think I was at a stage in my life where I was a little bit more what do you call it? Like I didn't give a fuck, like not in a good way either. Like I was very much falling off like the edge into a kind of bit of despair. So I was like, yeah, I'll just talk to you because I just don't give a fuck. And now I think if I was to meet Ringo, I'd be like, shit. Similarly, I think you'd be fine with Tom. I think it's Mike that might be, because Mike's very reserved. But like I think but one of the situations you'd have shit yourself would have been at Ringo's 70th. Really, really quickly, okay. So I know that we've got time here, but I'm doing the car, like it's his 70th birthday, and Ringo's like asking the ground staff to show people where to park. So after we do that, we're all dressed in our finest. It's men's Wimbledon final day. It was crazy, and fucking who should roll up the bloody drive but only bloody David Gilmour and his family, but in this ridiculously tiny green kind of like Toyota Aygo kind of fuel saving car. And like he rolls down his window and goes, where should I park? Like rock royalty. I go, if you just please go down there, please, Mr. Gilmour. And he was like, I was like, fuck it. He knows that I know who the fuck he is. But anyway, fast forward like an hour. Paul McCartney, right? Paul McCartney's chatting away with Ringo. Ringo introduced me to Paul McCartney, just really like, here's a member of my staff, William. And then, Paul's like, just gives me a nice cursory nod, and he's pressed for time anyway.
Yeah.
And there's freaking Brian Johnson, AC freaking DC. He was adorable, about 3 foot tall, adorable, the most adorable man I've ever met in my life. Like next to Paul Zollo, I think. And like he was talking to me about, I talked to him about the first time I saw AC/DC, and he loved it. He was adorable with it. Old mate from the Eagles, Joe Walsh, was there. Crazy mother trucker. Yeah, he was nuts. It was truly
always
mental.
Has been. I mean, he always has been.
Yeah,
he's always been crazy.
But the bed, I was just Mike Rutherford. Mike Rutherford from
sure do.
Mike Rutherford. Of course, you'd love him. He was because he used to pop around to see Ringo a lot. So he'd always used to stop his car and wind down the window and go, look, this place is looking lovely, really great job. And I'd always go, thank you so much, Mr. Rutherford. Thanks so much. And then, but he and I just ended up talking for like 15, 20 minutes. And Dave Gilmour comes up and starts talking. And he gets it was so disappointing. As soon as he knew that I was staff, he gave me the most dirtiest look. And he just literally turned away from me. And I'll never forget that. And I was so disappointed because I love Pink Floyd. Yeah. Not that, screw it, doesn't. I haven't stopped listening to Pink Floyd, It
scans though with Gilmour. I hate to say it, but I can kind of see that. I would have been more surprised. I would have been more surprised if you'd said Brian Johnson.
Oh, really?
You know what I mean? If you said Brian Johnson was a dick, I would have been like, oh, really?
Totally.
Oh, Gilmour, I'm like, I can sort of see that. I kind of,
for those that don't know, like Godalming, he went to Charterhouse, very, very posh, blah, blah, blah. So it's just that whole sort of, no. You won't do it all.
But so did Rutherford.
So, yeah.
Mike Rutherford went to Charterhouse as well, right? So.
Yeah. But I think he I loved him. I loved him so much. It's a lovely guy. Big fat hair. Loved him.
Yeah.
And then just to end this point, they all jammed at the end. Oh, Gary Brooker was there as well, the late, great Gary Brooker. And he was just on organ. They did, White Shade of Pale. And you got Ringo. Then they did some Beatles songs, like, the ones that Ringo sang. And all the families were videoing on their phones as well. It was hilarious. Wow. Totally mental, mate. Like, it was a dream. It was a total dream.
It's very, very
life
cool.
changing.
Well, thanks for telling the story, man. I mean, it's. I think at some point though, wouldn't you be like, well, oh, it's just Paul McCartney's here as well, and Martin. At some point, it would just be like, okay, well, that's just him again. Then and like another person. Look, I've got. Give me 10 minutes. I need to just go to the bathroom. Like, just another famous person.
Yeah, no, it was crazy, and I had quite a few beers, and by the end of it, I was actually really loosened up, and just relaxed.
Yeah.
And then just watching Paul McCartney get into this private helicopter and sail away, fly away. It was mental. It was hilarious actually, because we deliberately did a lowercase h on the field for the helicopter to land. I think they did that in a film, and I said,
"Oh, that is so good."
Do a lowercase h, lads. It would be absolutely hilarious. So it's to spray it on there. Oh, it's hilarious. Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, look, we've got to wrap up.
Okay, I'm sorry, man. It's been the longest chat you've ever had, I think.
It's great.
But,
no, Scott Haskin, the Petty Eight. Scott Haskin, we were on for 3.5 hours. Which got condensed down to an hour and 15 and 45 or something. Anyways, yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing editing work. But just to say really quickly, that John Scott conversation was amazing, though.
I mean, that's why I want to speak to Warren too, because then I've got the set then, right? The canonical works, the trilogy. It's Paul Zollo, John Scott, and Warren Zane. So those are the three that are primary sources and everything else. But
we've got to work on getting a heartbreaker on this show. We've got to. It's got to happen.
You though, Will, we didn't talk a little bit about. You have your own record store.
Oh God, yeah.
A very specific and very lovely connection back to Tom Petty. So tell people about the store. Tell people where they can find you if they want to talk to you. Tell them about the podcast if they want to go and listen to that, and any music you got kicking around.
Yeah, the Limehouse podcast. That's if you want to chat. That's what you're listening to. The likes of Michael Palin or Christopher Guest, Michael McKean. Spinal Tap. Oh God, the list goes on. There's so many people on the Limehouse podcast. That's on all your usual platforms. My record label is called my record label. It's getting late, isn't it? My record shop is called Wildflower Records, named after Wildflower, obviously. And that I did I set that up about a year and a half ago. And it's going okay. I've actually sold a few Petty records there.
Awesome.
So it's pretty cool, man. But if you want to listen to any of my bands or anything, I've been in. Christ, whoever the name of God is going to go on listening to my music, I'll be amazed. And if they do, mate, they can contact this show and I will send them a tenner.
There you have it, folks. Free money.
Dad's Dance Best. You can listen to my music there, and it's very Petty and it's very Ramones. It's very poppy and fun.
Cool. Okay, and I'll get those links. And so look for those links in the episode notes, folks, because that's where I'm going to drop everything. Will, it's been an absolute pleasure, as it always is talking to you. We've chatted a couple times at least online, and it's always a laugh. So hopefully this isn't the last time we talk.
Hopefully not, man. I love you so much. I love so much what you do. It's really very, very important, and I love your genuine love for the people you have on, and Tom's work. It's amazing. Such a legacy. It's really amazing. Very important what you're doing, my man.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, man.
Yeah, no sweat.